Welcome back, everyone. Today we've got a unique doctor as a guest on our show. Ex-CEO Discovery Health, ex-Deputy CEO Discovery Bank, ex-COO Netcare Group, ex-pilot, ex-fireman, current CEO of DNI. Dr. Ryan Noach, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So,
Very kind of you.
look, I'm going to be honest.
I feel intimidated by your introduction.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm glad I managed to intimidate Ryan. For the viewers will get that joke. Just look at the size difference, right? Ryan, I got to be honest. I'm super proud, and Yak, I'm super proud of myself, to be honest with you, that we managed to bag Dr. Ryan Noach on the show. You know, we are a fledgling. We're not even.
It wasn't hard, right? You sent me one note.
No. No. My first question is a selfish question, Ryan. It has nothing to do with you. It's more for my own curiosity, to be honest. But I want to sort of pitch it in a way that hopefully it'll be beneficial for the viewers and give us some perspective into your personality, right? Now, I know a lot of my friends and colleagues are going to be watching this and thinking, how on earth did this all manage to get Ryan Noach on his show, right? And I want to tell that story. And I'll explain why I need to tell that story and what my question is. It'll make sense then, right? So I'm going to tell a story, but I'm going to be deliberately vague to respect your privacy and mine also. So Yak knows this. So one day I was going to drop someone off at a place. And as I'm walking back to my car, I walk past Ryan. And I think to myself, I know this guy from somewhere. I'm sure he's come and spoken to us maybe at Norton Rose once about insurance or something. But I couldn't put my finger on it, right? And this is in the morning. So I get home, log into my desk on my computer, and I'm still thinking. And then, I don't know, it snaps. And I'm like, oh my word, this is Ryan Noach. And then I'm like, hold on, he's a doctor. So I go onto my WhatsApp group with that I've got Yak on and another cousin who's a support for this podcast. And I say to them, guys, you won't guess who basically emotional. I say, you won't guess who I walked past. And wouldn't it be brilliant if we can get him on the show? You know, why did I become a doctor? And this is like 9 a.m, so they're busy working. They don't respond. And I say, guys, I think I'm going to slide into the guys' DMs. What do you guys think? Would that be a bit too forward? And while I'm waiting for them to respond, they don't respond. But coincidentally, and I want to just pull out this post, coincidentally on my LinkedIn, a couple of days before, there was a post by a colleague of mine. It's not picking up on my phone, but there's a post on LinkedIn where one of my periodontist colleagues, Dr. Thiessen Werden, he's in Switzerland, he's doing a fellowship there. He'd said something to the effect that, you know what, don't hesitate to slide into people's DMs. The worst thing that can happen is they can say no, right? So I figured I'm not going to wait for Yak to come back. I said, let me go and slide into his DMs. And the worst thing you can do is say no, right? So I go and I type in Ryan Noach on LinkedIn. I try to send you a message and LinkedIn tells me, sorry, if you're not a connection, you can't send messages.
Yeah, but you need premium.
Yes, but if you're on LinkedIn Premium, you can. So I'm like, okay, let me just pay, first time ever, let me pay this thing.
First 7 days are free.
Yeah, no, but okay. Well, I didn't just connect because I got charged again. So I paid the $270 and I sent you a message. And I said to Yak and him, sorry guys, I've already done it. Whatever. He's not going to respond. It's cool.
You're getting reimbursed for that $270.
Yeah. Well, I won't submit a claim, right, to any company. But then Ryan replied like, I think within an hour and said, yeah, I should be happy to consider it. Just send me a note. And then I sent you an email later on and now you're here. All of that rambling, Ryan, is to say, and this is the part where it's a selfish question for me. Why'd you say yes?
Yeah, I mean, a few reasons. The first mistake you made, by the way, brother, is that you should have stopped me at 9 o'clock in the morning with the school.
No, you were getting into your car and leaving.
You should have knocked on the window.
He also didn't know who you were at that stage.
You know, I've always had a view in life that, and you know, your story is a bit embarrassing to me that you say, you express my importance of being approached. I don't feel that way about myself at all. And I feel a bit coy and embarrassed when you describe it that way. And I think everybody should have an opportunity and a chance. And, you know, my approach to my own life and to everybody who I interact with is, you know, to try and treat everybody with the same respect I want to be treated with. So I think it is a fairness and respect issue. And I will try 3 times to say yes. before I say no. I suppose you get people in life, and I've met those people who say no 3 times, and you have to be tenacious to get the yes. But I've got completely the opposite view. And one never knows what comes out of those engagements. And I'm lucky enough to spend time with you two guys and hear about an Everest summit and really fascinating stuff. So actually, it's the other way around, right? This is opportune for me.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. When you were mentioning that it's embarrassing, I thought you were going to say the story is embarrassing for me to tell it. Because I'll be honest with you, I felt like, should I tell the story? Because
No, don't misunderstand me.
I
It's
understand.
embarrassing to me.
No, I got it afterwards.
I'm lucky. I'm lucky to have the opportunity.
Yeah.
And ever since I've been on LinkedIn, it's an interesting platform. I dislike social media. I don't participate in social media.
Okay.
The team at Discovery, when I was employed there, convinced me to create a LinkedIn presence. And it's such an interesting platform. You meet amazing people. And because it's business oriented, generally the people that reach out have some business intent that's aside from a social intent. Yeah. And it's really, this is a good connection.
Thanks so much. Yeah. So thanks to Thiessen Baden, who's probably watching from Switzerland. I know he watches the show. For
ask. I think that was what he was trying to convey.
The worst thing you could have done was ignored or said no. So I appreciate you. Now, also, we have limited time, and I had an agreement with myself not to ramble as I usually do on the show. But then the first question is, I've rambled. But with that in mind, I avoid asking this question usually because my plan on this show is to have a long conversation and not ask the question, but still get the answer as to why did I become a doctor. But because we've got limited time with you, I'm going to go straight ahead and make an exception and say, Ryan, why did you become a doctor?
That's the only question I thought about before the meeting, right?
That's good, yeah.
I think it's a calling, to be honest. And what I've learned about myself now that I'm 51 years old is, one of the things that I was born with is a natural empathy. And I actually think that calling and a genetic ability to have empathy probably took me down the road of medicine. There's life occurrences that played a part, and those are relevant, and I'd like to tell you about those. But I think it's inside me. And when I wake up in the morning, my sense of value, of impact, of my role on the planet is closely linked to what I've done to help people around me. Different people have different drivers. Some people are driven by their ability to amass success and wealth. Some are driven by family. My number one is my impact on others and how I've helped others. Family is a close second for me in that order of kind of hierarchy of importance. And I think that's what's drawn me here. There are life occurrences, and if you don't mind me rambling, maybe
Please
I
do.
should. Yeah,
you're supposed to be doing
all the central question. Now I've realized you're going to talk a lot, so I'll listen.
Oh, it's the first guest that's had a dig. Thank you. Putting my phone on airplane mode. Sorry.
So my dad was a volunteer firefighter, an ambulance medic. And in fact, he was on the ambulance side, not on the fire side. And that always inspired me, and I loved that work. And I got involved at a very young age, and it gave me a real flair and understanding of emergency medicine, which I just loved. And the other part of it was that I really enjoyed playing rugby and got a bad injury when I was in standard 8 those days. I think it's grade 10 now. And to stick with the rugby team, I ended up becoming the team's first aider. But the combination of the volunteering in the emergency services, the first aid exposure, and I think a genetic predisposition linked to a sense of value, I think that's what got me there.
So your dad was an EMS?
My dad is a dentist.
Okay, I didn't know this.
Yeah. My dad was a dentist in private practice for nearly 50 years, retired from dentistry, but very much still working. He's a software developer now. And he loved dentistry. He was a very committed dentist, and his patient loved him. And to this day, this morning in the gym, somebody said to me, "Your dad was my dentist. He was the best dentist ever." So I have that regularly. Cool. So he was involved in clinical care and in the medical field. and he volunteered as an ambulance medic.
Wow. So maybe you can put in a word. Maybe we can get another guest on the show, a dentist.
It'll be very interesting. And it seems like you kind of like steered towards his path, ex-medic moving into IT. Because if I summarize it, is that what he did?
Yeah, in some way. Although I think my dad, you'd have to ask him, I don't think he plotted his journey to IT. My dad is very talented and taught himself to coded a practice management system for his own practice. It did really well, ended up supplying it to colleagues, then started selling it, and then was bought out by an IT firm. He's still a shareholder. Strong commercial guys run the business, but he still codes a lot of their code. It's called Solumed, and a large portion of the dental fraternity uses it. So you
might have heard of this story, Ryan, but Mark Zuckerberg, I don't know if you know, but he did that for his dad. His dad was a dentist.
I didn't know that.
And he coded some software for his dad. That was one of the first work he did. I'm pretty sure he was on one of these recent podcasts where he mentions that. So that's cool. All right. So there's this calling. But I mean, what was it growing up? Were you typical head boy material, first team rugby, all that kind of stuff? One of my colleagues who watches the show, she says to me, Yash, we're tired of seeing the rags to riches story on your show because that's such a common South African story. Get somebody who's privileged for a change. So are you one of those?
Yes,
okay.
I'm privileged, deeply privileged.
Yeah.
And that's a double-edged sword, actually, in South Africa. But I grew up in a white family in Johannesburg in a time when white privilege allowed you to have advantages that many other South Africans didn't have. I was born in 1974, so the first 20 years of my life were in the old South Africa. And that definitely gave me advantages that others didn't have. I went to a Jewish day school and got a brilliant secular education. It wasn't my happiest period of my life. I didn't feel my value system matched with the environment and the people that I was with. And when I went to university, I found people that I identified better with in a much more diverse crowd. That took me down a strange road, a road of some resentment actually towards my parents for sending me to this very closed environment when I think I would have flourished better in a more diverse environment. But I've come to terms with that, and I know that they were doing what they thought was best for me, absolutely. And I did well at school. I was a leader and an achiever, and academically strong, sporting strong. It's a long time ago. I struggle to remember it now. I think my biggest success in life is beautiful kids and a beautiful wife and just a great family environment. And I think that by far trumps all.
And so when you were in matric considering careers, was medicine just your first choice?
Yeah, it was my only choice. They force you to make other choices. But for me, it was the only choice. I would have done anything to get in. I always aspired to that and was fortunate to be accepted to Wits and had a very good, undergraduate medical education. I think Wits doctors from that era, probably still today, have just done brilliantly all over the world. And my colleagues are all over the world in leadership positions in healthcare.
Okay. You touched on some life experiences that led you or steered you towards medicine. I mean, do you want to expand on them more?
Well, it was the injury that I sustained playing rugby. It was a bad injury. It was a compartment syndrome for the clinical people on your broadcast. And it was unusual because the compartment syndrome was in my thigh. And typically, they happen in the calf or the forearm. So it was a serious injury and I nearly lost my leg. I missed a large part of my schooling in Standard 8 in grade 10. And it was an extended recovery from that and took me out of rugby. I had to have serial skin grafts to close the lesion. I've got a big hernia in that leg and, the normal injury story. I was lucky. I've recovered fully. But I suppose that gave me a real interest in medicine over and above all the other environmental factors that associated.
And any interesting stories from med school that you can think of, or is it just a breeze and it's a flash? It's 6 years though, so it's quite long, right?
It's hardly a breeze. I mean, it's a tough course. But I had I made just unbelievable friends and had the best clinical partners at medical school. You generally work with a partner, and the two of us teamed up with another two guys. And so there were four of us together, a Lebanese guy, and myself and two other chaps. And we had just a fantastic experience as undergrads. We used to climb over the fence behind medical school into the Johannesburg College of Education to go and lie at the pool with the nurses. We had some great holidays together. We took an old car from one of my colleagues' parents, and we drove all the way up the coastline and stopped at crazy places and just had a great experience as medical students. It was really fun. I worked through medical school. I earned a separate income. And I suppose that made it a very full and busy period. And my volunteer activities in emergency services picked up pace. And I was very involved in emergency services. So I was saying to my kids who are on university holidays now, I didn't really ever have a university holiday. I was busy. My life was full. I like it that way. I like waking up with a full agenda. I often lament to my wife, I wish we had more free time, but then we go about filling it as quickly as we can.
Yeah. Saying yes to podcasts and things.
Saying yes to everything,
yeah.
With respect, trying to maximize, just like you guys, similar personalities.
Yeah.
You said the work that you did in university, like after hours, was that the volunteership?
A mixture, yes. The volunteering was important and took up a lot of time. And we formalized that. We set up a unit of doctors who supported Johannesburg Emergency Services. We got sponsored. We had full-time response vehicles, and there were 5 of us on call to support Joburg Emergency Services, and we would go out and do those calls. I built the unit when I was a medical student and crewed it when I was postgrad. With colleagues, most of whom were older than me, actually, ahead of me at medical school. And did a range of things, did a lot of rescue and firefighting training, and finished my time with Joburg Emergency Services as a divisional officer in the emergency services. And it was just probably, if I could wind back the clock, those were my favorite times. Amazing times. I had formal employment too. Sadly, I worked as a bouncer.
Oh, wow.
And worked at nightclubs in the night, and it was a good job as a medical student because the work started late, and I could still do a full day of medical school and get to work and earn a good living.
Maybe this is where I recognize Ryan. He probably bounced me at one of the clubs.
Very likely.
You were not born
with no ID. Sorry, it's a private party.
You're a bit young.
Okay, and with good money.
It was excellent money.
Why did you do this? I mean, you're a guy from privilege. You don't need to do it.
That's my question. Like, was there a need to?
I didn't like depending on my parents for an income. I was involved in bodyguarding and security, and it was a good way to express, I guess, some of that. And I hooked up with a band of brothers, and you wouldn't believe it, that the loyalty and trust and that sense of kinship that you form in that kind of a circle is about as strong as you'll find anywhere. You don't get that kind of loyalty easily. And some of those guys are still very good friends of mine, and we were a team.
This is fascinating.
Wow. Yeah.
You mentioned postgrad. Was that postgrad in a medical?
That was while I was undergrad. That was while I was a medical student. Yeah.
But you did say something about postgrad. I don't know if
postgrad. I was working as a doctor in emergency services as a volunteer most of the time.
Right. So now, how does somebody who has a calling for medicine get out of medicine, and why?
It was not by design at all. And actually, a part of me still hankers for medicine. I love patient care. I love the intimacy of patient care. And I look at what some of my colleagues are still doing in medicine and sometimes feel envious about it. It's just a fantastic profession, and one that I would recommend to anyone who has the ability to have empathy and wants to have impact. But, I had started a helicopter emergency service when I was working as a medical officer in Joburg 163. I was the chief flight doctor of Flight for Life, which was Joburg's helicopter service, and it was run by the trauma unit under Prof. Ken Boffard at the time. And I was working in the trauma unit as a medical officer and was the chief flight doctor. And at that time, the state withdrew the subsidy.
Okay.
It was probably 1998. And there were changes afoot in government and the way government was run. At the time, I remember the equation. It was astounding. And an average emergency helicopter response cost the state about 12,500 Rand at the time. And it cost about 11 cents a day to feed an HIV patient at the time, a kid with HIV. And that disparity was so wide that, it was quite rational what the state did, where they said, we've got to cut out these very expensive tertiary services and we've got to focus our money on primary care. So it was a rational move, but it was heartbreaking for those of us that were in the service. So there was a chief pilot, a chief doctor, and a chief paramedic, and the three of us stood together and we formed we privatized the emergency service, and it was led by a guy who could afford to buy a helicopter at the time, who was from the construction industry, an entrepreneur, and he provided the leadership to the three of us, and he acquired the machine, and he gave us the roles, and we privatized that emergency service. And, ultimately that morphed into Netcare 911. And today, Netcare 911's aeromedical service came largely from that service originally.
Yeah. So, for me, it sounds like you're quite synonymous with not just participating in these endeavors that you embark on. You actually, start forming structure, and it is born into these entities that we see today from these heli services and your what you did at university with the EMS.
Yeah, I think that, having a vision and an idea is useful and important, but the hard part is actually doing it. And I'm good at doing it. I'm good at executing on it. I like to be surrounded by inspiring and visionary people who can continue to create that vision. That was a great privilege at Discovery, to be led by Adrian and have his vision and inspiration. And here at DNI, our founder, Andrew Dunn, does the same. And I function well in that environment where I can execute meaningfully on that vision. And I do have a bias to action.
Do you think you're born this way, or how does it work? How do you get this way? What do you think is the root?
Yeah, I think I'm hard on myself, and I push myself to do more and achieve more and deliver.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty focused on delivering. And I think, in truth, I'm unfair in some way to some of the people around me because I expect them to deliver too and maybe put them under too much pressure sometimes. I've learned to manage that very tightly with colleagues and developed very good working relationships. But early in my career, I think I was overly demanding. And, I think with my kids, I'm still learning. Okay. I think I still put them under too much pressure at times.
Yeah. And so I think you skimmed a bit, but how do you get from doctor to CEO? Gradually.
I ended up working as the medical director at Netcare 911, and then the chief executive officer of Netcare 911, and then moved into the Netcare Group, and ultimately was the chief operating officer of the Netcare Group. That was a board level position. It was at a time that the founder and group CEO, Jackie Cheval, an amazing entrepreneur, emigrated, and Richard Friedland took over as the group CEO. And there was a succession process. And once Richard took over, I looked after South Africa because Richard was living in the UK for a while. When Richard came back, we didn't work that well together, and I made some mistakes in my life, and ended up leaving Netcare quite unhappily.
Okay, did you just fit in the boardroom? I mean, from the ER to the boardroom. I'll tell you why I asked.
No, I still don't fit in the
No,
boardroom.
Can you imagine?
I don't fit in the boardroom today.
What do you mean? Why don't you fit in?
You know,
What way?
it was always a joke at the discovery board, where you know, I was the only guy in the room without a tie and jacket.
Okay.
And I would be eating while the meeting was continuing, not rudely, quite respectfully. I think respect is critical, but I'm usually hungry. And, you know, I guess I have a slightly different approach. My dad has always said that one should be WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And that really is the case with me. So I can't pretend to be fancy in a boardroom and put on a facade of, I just am who I am. That doesn't mean I don't take it seriously. To the contrary, I'm very intense and very serious and take my responsibilities deeply seriously. And so I lean in meaningfully when I need to.
But I think the point is you were comfortable with that transition. Like, it wasn't like you felt intimidated to be sitting.
No, I felt intimidated a lot.
Okay.
A lot.
Because that was my experience.
I still feel intimidated.
Yeah.
You know, we have a board meeting here at DNI. We've got incredibly successful, incredibly brilliant shareholders who in their own rights are deeply successful, notwithstanding what DNI's success is. And I think it's very good to feel intimidated, and I do feel intimidated. I think it keeps you sharp, keeps you on your toes, and I like being surrounded by those people who really make me think and work hard.
I'm glad you said that, because, you know, when I moved from Standerton, that Standerton Hospital, to Sandton, Norton Rose Fulbright, it was a massive transition, and I was super intimidated. I was like, I'm out of my depth here. My dad said to me, because my dad's an attorney, he said to me, don't worry, these guys probably might even be intimidated by you. You coming here with a doctor title, they don't know about it. They're lawyers. But I still felt it. It took me a long time to get comfortable in the boardroom. So at least, you know,
and I would say kudos to you for that vulnerability.
Yeah.
And for admitting that now and then to yourself. I think that being vulnerable is a good human quality. And if you tell people that you're vulnerable and you're frank about being intimidated, generally good people will support you.
Okay.
And welcome that. The risk of not being open about it is they read that intimidation as an arrogance, as an aloofness, and then they perceive you really poorly, right? So kudos to you for that. I am still frequently intimidated by that, and I welcome that feeling when it comes. You know, I'll give you a real example. I've been at DNI for about 18 months. When I joined 18 months ago, I didn't even understand the terminology. You know, I didn't know much about the telco industry. I've never been an investment banker. A lot of the terminology here is investment banking terminology and you know, sophisticated telco terminology, and it's taken me time to learn it. And I feel rocks to say, I don't understand, guys, go slowly, please explain it to me. And I've had to say that many, many times. And my colleagues now chuckle when I say it, but you know that is the truth.
It takes self-esteem to be able to do that, though, because not everybody wants to admit and be vulnerable and say, I don't know.
Yeah. I think the opposite is true. So if you don't mind, I'm going to disagree with you as the host. I think it takes more humility.
Yeah.
You're saying it takes self-confidence. I actually think it takes humility to admit that vulnerability.
Okay.
Yeah, well, my take on it is because we had another guest on the show that also kind of alluded to the same thing. When he first started when he joined corporate, and he was very intimidated, but also at the same time, he didn't want to be the smartest person in the room. He wanted to learn from other people. So my take is basically, you don't want to come across as arrogant or get to a point where you walk in and you feel that everyone is lesser than you or knows a lot less than you, because that's a whole perception that will create that mind shift of creating that personal approach with someone.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say. I mean, there's actually, I think, a raging debate about this, right? And it just depends who you are and how you wear your skin. There are some people who feel like they must be identified as the smartest person in the room, and they will keep pointing out what they've done, what they've achieved, and that they're ahead of the meeting, and that's okay. I mean, I don't think they mean disrespect to anyone else. It's obviously their own sense of value that needs, to be recognized as the smartest person. I'd love to be the smartest person in the room. I just don't feel like everybody needs to know that. You can be the smartest person in the room, but also say the least and think the most. And I personally, my style is that there's virtue in that. But you get some people who say the most and want to be identified as the smartest. And that's also okay. You need all personalities in a room and in a team to make a team work. I would say from my Discovery time, one of the most incredible parts of working at Discovery is that you are never the smartest person in the room. Man, there are talented, smart people in that group. And Adrian has an unrelenting mandate about just hiring the smartest. It's McKinsey-like. You have that same category of people. So every meeting you go to, you're going to be surrounded by actuaries, financial professionals, health professionals, who are not only more qualified than you, but also intellectually more gifted than you. And that's a privilege, because you do, as you said earlier, you do then learn in every single meeting.
Do you ever get nervous for anything?
Yeah, I do.
Do you remember when the last
I didn't
time?
get nervous today.
I said it to you. I'm super nervous because I want this to go well. I don't want the tech to fail us and things like that. But can you even remember when last?
I get nervous. I get nervous often.
Yeah.
But this kind of engagement I really enjoy. I like talking to people. Over my career, I've been fortunate enough to do lots of interviews. In fact, from my LinkedIn profile that I was in your seat a lot of the time doing interviews with interesting people, and I became accustomed to it, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it. It's another reason why I accepted your invite. But I do get nervous, and I feel performance pressure often.
Okay. Would you ever go back to, are you still registered with the HPCSA, and do you practice or not really?
I've let my registration with the HPCSA lapse, but that said, I still remain current.
Yeah.
So I read a lot. I read a lot of journal articles. I read it on stuff that interests me. Health, wellness, anti-aging, exercise, nutrition. So I'm reading journal articles almost every day, I would say. Probably more so than current healthcare professionals.
So you're doing CPD for fun then?
Yeah. And I love it. I find it fascinating. And my wife has an interest in this stuff. And although she doesn't read the clinical side of the article, she likes to understand the outcomes and conclusions. So we often have those conversations.
Are you just interested in the latest, or does it help with business or something like that?
No, there's no business impact. I love evidence-based medicine. I'm a true believer in evidence-based medicine. I love the science of, proving that in fact some treatment or lifestyle works. So I read a lot of that evidence-based medicine.
So that being said, for Yash and I being lay people in that industry, if you can summarize for us, what are the top 2 or 3 biohacks that you've read about recently?
Well, number 1, 2, and 3 is without doubt exercise. It's incontrovertible. And whatever evidence you read, whether it be around mental health, longevity, cardiovascular health, at the moment there is incontrovertible, hard evidence-based medicine that exercise is the best medicine for many reasons. And so I'm religious about my exercise, not necessarily only because of the evidence, but also I find in my life it's a very positive factor. It calms me. It's a social moment for me every day. In an intensely packed day, I have 45 minutes of social time when I exercise with friends. It's good for my mental health. I know that without a doubt. It lifts me. I feel lifted afterwards, even on the days that I drag myself there, like this morning in the cold weather.
So you're not one of those guys that put your headphones on and to yourself?
No. If I train on my own, I wear headphones, but I try very hard not to train on my own. I love the social side of exercising. And so I've got a small team of guys that I train with religiously. And there's usually at least 2 or 3 of us there in most days.
Do you do much cardio, or is it more weight?
I do cardio 3 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week. and weight training the rest of the time. But my weight training regime is different to, typical. I do high intensity weight training. So my heart rate never averages less than 115 through a weight session. I take very few breaks. I do very high reps. I do heavy weights too. The combination of heavy weights, high reps, and no breaks, you actually have a good cardiovascular workout. They call it zone 2 workouts. Well, mine are all zone 2. Some of them are even zone 3.
Yeah. Well, Discovery changed my life. I'm not blowing smoke up anybody's whatever, but I'm on a 150-1 week streak at the moment, and I make sure I do it. Yeah.
I'm on 120.
Okay, what did you have a pause in between?
I had COVID, and I missed a couple of weeks, and that set me right back.
Pro tip: you could have emailed them and told them. I know you know this, but you could have emailed them and told them.
But that's cheating. I want the streak.
No, I had ankle surgery, so I was booked off for 6 weeks. So I emailed them. I gave them a doctor's note, and it's cool. Okay.
Brownie points.
Well, anyway, I'm on a higher streak than Ryan Noach.
Yeah, but I've got a friend, ex-colleague Johnny Broomberg, who had a 360-week streak.
Wow. Yeah, I think
he worked that out in years, eh?
Yeah, it's like about 8 years. Don't calculate my maths there. What was it like, on the note of Discovery? I mean, what was it like being a CEO and being the, in inverted commas, big boss of 5,500 plus employees?
Man, it's a massive responsibility and a very difficult job. And I know that there's bias in this, and I'm the first to say that I'm biased, but I think it's one of the hardest jobs in South Africa. Why is it so difficult? Well, like all big businesses, there's all the issues with the big business. There's thousands of staff, which you've got a responsibility to. There's a product, there's commercial issues, there's a business to run, there's shareholders. You report results every 6 months. You're only as good as your last 6 months' results. There's stakeholders and customers. So all of the normal stuff of running an enormous business. And you know the numbers there, right? I mean, roughly, off the top of my head, there's about 90 billion rand a year that goes through Discovery Health. A large amount of it is premiums for the medical schemes, but Discovery Health, of course, bills the customers, collects those premiums, remits them, make sure, and then pays them back out again, claims and healthcare claims. So that's not the true revenue of Discovery Health, but it touches almost 1% of South Africa's GDP. So the commercial issues are very complex and at scale, as big as it gets in this country. Yeah. Aside from that, there is the huge societal and social responsibility that you carry there. Firstly, 75% of South Africa's taxpayers are the customers of Discovery. So you're looking after the tax base and their health and well-being. And secondly, there's all the ethical and humanitarian decision-making. There's this natural tension in health insurance about what you can afford to pay for and how much you pay for versus what doctors prescribe and what's needed. And somewhere you've got to find a balance. And that's a very, very difficult job wherever you go in the world, to find the correct balance for that. To make sure that you can put your head on the pillow at night and know when you go to sleep you're doing the right thing by your customers with the indemnity you're offering, but at the same time that you can sustain the medical scheme so that you don't bankrupt it overnight. And so there's this strong ethical tension mixed with the social and societal responsibility, and it's a very public job.
It's so public, and you're not going to please anybody all the time, everyone all the time, and you probably have...
In fact, the people that you please tend to be quite quiet.
Okay.
Because you please the people that are very sick. By definition, they're in the minority. The old rule of health insurance, 80% of the people don't claim and pay, 20% of the people claim a lot and pay their premiums. That 20% are highly satisfied, they're quiet. The 80% who are paying but not necessarily claiming because they haven't broken their ankle or got frostbite, and they don't realize when you need it, what it costs. They're complaining about a 5 Rand copay at the pharmacy, which is actually not what health insurance is really about. They're complaining why they got to pay a 15 Rand copay on their chronic medicine every month. But when you have a serious incident, my best friend fell off a motorbike. 2.5, 3 million rand later, and he, it didn't cost him a rand, because that's when discovery steps up. So different topic, but I think where I was going is that it's extremely public, highly emotive. You've got an obligation to South Africa's tax base, who do phone you individually when they've got needs and wants. And you've got all the pressures of running a listed commercial entity. It's a tough job.
It's an interesting thing you mention about the happy customers are quiet ones, because I'm guessing that the feedback that you probably get was very complaint heavy. People don't write to you and say, Ryan, thank you so much for...
Let me tell you a statistic I'm very proud of.
Please, yeah?
The Council for Medical Schemes, who's the regulator in that space, lists the schemes with the highest number of complaints in its annual report every year. But with a total lack of science, they don't divide it by the scheme membership. They just say, in absolute terms, Discovery Health is 7 times the size of its next biggest competitor. So it is the giant. It never features in the top 10 list of complaints.
Wow. Despite the volume of...
And that's not using a divisible denominator as a percentage of members. That's in absolute terms.
Because I feel like it's not easy. We don't make it easy for people to give us good feedback or positive feedback. My colleague and I, because I work at MPS, Medical Protection, we wrote an article recently where we said, we think the HPCSA should consider having a compliments portal, because they've got a complaints portal. And why I thought of this article idea was because after my ankle surgery with my surgeon down the road here, I wanted to send him a compliment, but there was no formal place for me to do it. So I had to go onto Google, onto his page, and give him 5 stars. But I feel like a compliment will go a long way.
Well,
And you guys don't get that, did you?
Yeah.
Probably.
My opinion is that, sorry, because he mentioned this previously, and I wanted to tell him, but now's an opportunity. Me owning a practice, a private practice as well, I think it gives too much opportunity for perverse incentives. Being the medical practitioners will then ask patients, okay, will you just please write a response here and give me,
Well, I've disagreed with him once in the interview. Now I'm going to disagree with you.
Love it.
That's the end of disagreeing, right? But I actually think ratings are critically important. They tend to be a self-fulfilling cycle of improving performance. So I think ratings are good. I think every customer service should have a rating associated. I think Uber started that trend, and now you see it everywhere, and I encourage it. And I would love to have a place where doctors could be celebrated.
Yeah.
It's love to.
For the patient's well-being and for the doctor's well-being.
And I'll tell you, my anecdotal experience is 99% of the time, doctors are doing a great job and their intent is absolutely good. But as we all know as clinical professionals, every procedure, every medication, there is a risk of a side effect and a complication.
The rewards program with Discovery, was that initiated in your time?
Vitality Rewards was there before I arrived. I was at Discovery for 16 or 17 years. Over the years it evolved, and I was very involved in the R&D process around that. It's the world's best wellness program. And, I always laugh when competitors come out and say, marketing whistles and bells. They even put it in radio adverts. It's so inane of them, because what they're missing is that actually it changes behavior, and the behavior change means that the scheme does better.
Regardless.
And so, let them call it marketing whistles and bells in their naivety. It actually really works.
A close family friend, I don't want to call him out and mention him, but he said the exact same thing to me. And I said to him, you know what, it's changed my life. Even if it is bells and whistles, it's changed my life for the better.
Yeah, but Active Rewards, which you're talking about, I don't know how we landed up talking about Discovery, I guess, but happy to do so. But Active Rewards is fascinating. People are running out there on treadmills to make their points every week. They're getting healthier and it's good for them, but they are chasing a target to get a small reward at the end of the day. And everybody wins.
Yeah.
Everybody wins. It's just a crazy program. We're like hamsters in. Last night I finished my training session, and I knew I needed to scrape into my points this week because I was lazy on the weekend, and so I went and did an incline walk on the treadmill for 15 minutes after my training session, just to get over the hour and make sure that I got extra points for the session. Right. So that is the change of behavior.
So what do you think about the future of healthcare in this country? to totally pivot.
We've got to resolve the structural inequalities, and it's unsustainable on the current basis. And I think as healthcare professionals, we have an ethical, professional obligation to find a solution. It doesn't sit well that the majority of our people cannot access the same quality of care as 16% of the population, or the three of us sitting in this room who have private medical insurance. We've got to fix that. I think the starting point is improving public sector healthcare delivery, long before you look at any pooled funding solutions. But I think there are structural and regulatory changes that are needed both on the private side and on the public side. I think a single fund in the form of an NHI with one rule that applies to all will fail dismally. And I say that based on the evidence. There are no countries in the world that mandate a single system. The UK has the biggest national healthcare system in the world, and I would argue, notwithstanding its failures, the best. Yet in the UK, 23% of the population have private health insurance. It was 12 before COVID. Now it's 23. People are opting for private health insurance when they see the NHS having difficulties. They have an alternative. And by the way, that's good for the NHS in the UK, because then it takes some of the burden off them from discretionary spending on healthcare. So we have to solve it. The only way to do it is to sit around the table and put heads together. Why is that not happening readily? There are huge ideological gaps. And unfortunately, our current Minister of Health and our current leadership in the Department of Health just cannot ideologically see a world where there's public-private partnership in a real sense, not lip service. And where people can make discretionary decisions and where excellence is rewarded. If I were the Minister of Health today, the first thing I would do is I would focus on execution, on improving public sector delivery. And there is massive inefficiency, gross inefficiency, that needs to be addressed. And I would be sitting around the table with private stakeholders and other stakeholders and begging for help, cooperation, partnership, looking for solutions.
Are they willing to come and help?
The private sector, begging to help.
Begging, okay.
Especially now. They're eaten up and bruised and threatened by NHI and desperate to show a way that they can help. Now's the time.
Just let us help.
Just let them help. Go to the hospital groups and, buy ward space cheap and put state patients in private wards when they've got complex conditions and deal with the waiting lists and do it on a sustainable, cost-effective basis. And the private sector will come along.
If they had to approach you and say, Ryan, we'd love you to facilitate this private-public partnership, would you ever consider something like that?
Without hesitating. It would be the most meaningful thing to do. But that's purely theoretical, right? Because it can only be the minister that sets the tone for that. And that nobody's making me the Minister of Health. I'm probably not up for it.
Cheeky smile, because I was going to ask you, would you be Minister of Health?
Sure. It's a very tough job and a thankless job. But if the president sat here and said, would you be the Minister of Health? I mean, it's cuckoo land, right? Because who am I to be the Minister of Health? But I would step up.
Okay, cool. All right. We've got a volunteer. You heard it first here.
Exactly. Because you're very community driven. As you said, that was I call it the Ikigai principle of wanting to give back to community. First is that, then family. So I think you would
Japanese principle.
Very, very well in that space. So yeah, for any listeners that has a contact to the government,
I'm sure Ryan has contacts, but that's a good sign for me that you said this, because it tells me you still believe in this country and you wouldn't want to leave.
You know what's a good sign? There's 100 people like me, probably 99 better than me, who would answer you the same way. They'd take the job and they'd make a difference. I know that. The CEOs of the hospital groups, a lot of discovery leaders, a lot of the other health insurance leaders, they would, if they really were given a genuine opportunity and a mandate and empowered to make change, they would do it. They're committed. There's a very committed leadership team out there. I think Adrian Gore would do it.
Okay, but back to you. I mean, are you staying? Are you positive? Are you happy? Because I've got lots of friends and family saying leave, telling me leave.
Yes, I love the country. I'm deeply committed, and I tend to see the good far more so than I see the bad. We have got difficulties and challenges, but there's so much good going for us at the moment as well. So much good. It was just great to read yesterday that we got a positive budget surplus before the cost of interest. Okay, we're over indebted as a country, and we've got to deal with the debt. But we actually got a budget surplus for the first time in 12 years yesterday. A 0.7% we snuck over, but nonetheless, that's good fiscal governance, and kudos to our finance minister, who's had a very tough time in the GNU resetting expectations and multi-party politics.
Yak and I share your optimism about the country. It's one of the reasons why I deliberately named this "Why Did I Become a Doctor?" South Africa. I was told to drop the South Africa thing because it's limiting, but I want this podcast to contribute to change in healthcare in some small way, whether it influences people to get into it or out of it. And so, yeah.
But when you make it big like Steve Bartlett, then you can do "Why Did I Become a Doctor?" America and Australia and UK.
Yeah. We'll get a network syndication going.
Yeah. But it's a bit of a pivoting question for me. On that note, I mean, the whole three of us here, we're kind of in this generational time where we kind of also have to be committed. We can't be biased and say, oh, we're optimistic, but then, we're working like a 9-to-5 job and we don't have like goals and values. But what would you say to, you've got 2 daughters. What would you tell your kids? Would you want them to stay? What are their interests? What do they want to do?
Yeah, I'll tell you, frankly, my conversation with my kids, I encouraged them to do their postgraduate studies in South Africa. I've got 3 older kids. They're all still here. I've got one at Stellenbosch, 2 at UCT. And I'm delighted that they're studying here. I'm convinced that they're getting a brilliant undergraduate education. I'd be very supportive if they want to go overseas and do some postgraduate training, because I think the diversity of learning and the diversity of culture is very good for development. I don't know if they're going to do that, but if they'd like to, I'd be supportive. But I hope that they'd come back and work here afterwards. And I've encouraged them to be here. And a sense of family and having family close by, I think, is also critically important. So I would love, they say you can't chase your kids, which I know, but I would love to find a way to try and keep us close to each other if we can. Although the world is a small place now, but if we can, naively, I have that mental image.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on AI and healthcare? You think about it? Do you use AI?
Yes. Yeah, use AI. I was talking to my dad this weekend. He's using Copilot in some of his development now, and he says that it's cutting massive amounts of time. I met with our team at Pay Me Now, one of the subsidiary businesses here at DNI. Actually, it's no longer a subsidiary. We sold it and externalized it, but we are shareholders through a separate structure. And Pay Me Now, Gerry Potgieter, who's one of the founders of Pay Me Now, was telling me in his dev team, which does the app and the front end stuff, they've saved 48% of dev time per function point that they're developing using AI, deploying AI for development. Now, in an environment of scarce development skills where you just can't find brilliant high-end developers, you're effectively getting one person to do the job that 2 people used to do, right? That's what it means, 50% time saving. It's astounding. So it's changing our world and our business enormously. I think LLMs are just mind-blowing, and the speed at which they're developing is quite incredible. I think there are real risks, and there's a lot said about the risks. But I think as a world, we've got to embrace this technology, cognizant of the risks and mitigating the risks every step of the way. I don't know if you know the Gartner hype cycle. There's a cycle defined by Gartner around new technology, and they call it the hype cycle. And at the moment, I think AI is at the peak of the hype.
Okay.
What happens is it drops off that peak and it reaches the valley of reckoning, or the valley where the realities of the technology become evident. And then you tend to get kind of a more realistic, slower lift of sentiment and support for it over time. I think we're right at the peak of hype at the moment. I should have bought more NVIDIA shares. That's pretty clear.
Yeah.
And the supercomputing happening, around the chips and the AI is amazing. I was reading about Amazon's new data center, which is just the most incredible investment in a supercomputer.
Do you use AI personally, like in your day-to-day life?
I use it as a desktop tool.
Yeah.
I would not say I'm a sophisticated user, but ChatGPT often gives me answers for stuff that I'm looking for. I use Copilot on my Microsoft applications. That's probably the extent of my use of it. I use Siri, for convenience and
setting alarms and
some voice interaction.
So Ryan, what do you do for fun?
A lot.
Yeah.
As I said to you at the start, I like to keep a packed day.
But everything's fun for you, I guess.
That's a good answer. That's how I should have answered. Thank you.
No, but in the conventional sense of
I love my work, so that is fun. But what do I do outside of the work? Exercise for me is probably the most important hobby in my life. We've spoken about that, but that's every day for me. Usually 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, sometimes 5. But on average 6 days a week, and that's probably an hour a day. So that's a big commitment of time, but it's very, very important and so much fun. And I just love that, and I'm addicted to it. I think I've got an endorphin problem, and those receptors are tingling all the time, and I'm just having to stimulate them. I've got a series of great hobbies. I fly helicopters, and I'm very passionate about aviation. I don't fly as much as I would like to, but my son was at a boarding school in KZN, and I was flying down there regularly for the last 5 years, and that's just been a huge privilege.
That's so cool. You fly yourself there.
Do you own
and my wife is a pilot too.
Oh, wow. Okay. Do you guys own your own?
Yes. Yeah, we have a share in aircraft, and my wife and I fly together, and that's just so much fun.
Dad's picking me up, and then the kids look in the car park, and meanwhile it's the airfield. What do you call it?
No.
When you land?
So there's a very clear helipad, but there's a very clear rule about that, right? You stay as far as you can from the school, right? So I never ever embarrassed my kids, and I'm not showy like that. I fly for the pleasure of flying. I love it. Next month, my wife and I are going to do a mountain flying course in the Drakensberg, where you fly at high altitude, landing on pinnacles in high winds sometimes. And that's a special kind of flying, and you fly with experienced instructors alongside you to teach you and learn, but it's really fun.
I've got a very interesting video for you afterwards.
I just realized something. You guys have some sort of connection, because I've never been on a chopper in my life, right? You fly them. Yak's been airlifted by one, like dangling on a rope.
I didn't tell you that part of the Everest journey. I had to be medically evacuated, obviously, with the frostbite. But at the time, it was considered the highest long line sling operation in history. 7,300 meters.
Sure.
Yeah. So my pilot, Maurizio Follini, he's the bad boy in the helicopter rescue industry out of Italy. He's the one that rescued me.
Wow.
I'll show you
in what aircraft?
Afterwards. I'm not sure, actually.
Yeah.
Will you be able to tell just by looking at it what type of
stripped
probably,
it down?
Yeah,
they stripped it down.
Yeah, they would have taken everything out so that it weighed nothing, and flown on a wisp of fuel to try and get up there and get lift.
They did, because when we landed back at base camp, when they dropped me off, there was a canister that they started fueling up again for us to get.
No, they would have flown on a wisp of fuel, just enough to get there and back safely.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Cathedral Peak is high. I think the last time we were up there, we got up to about 11,500 foot, which is seriously high. Yeah, seriously.
And you guys got to land, or
we land up there and you walk around a bit, but the flying is the fun part.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, very cool. So
the flying choppers. Exercising. Anything else weird?
I mean,
wonderful?
Family. I've got kids.
Yeah.
I've got a 4-year-old, and that's pretty busy. At 51, I forgot how busy a 4-year-old is. And man, what a
So you have
privilege,
the kid,
and I'm
what?
loving it.
47, you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I
I'm
still got
loving
time.
it. I'm
Yeah.
loving it. And he keeps us really busy. He's a wonderful, happy child. And I try to be an engaged father. So that is busy. I've got a good social life. Got close friends. I don't have many friends, but I've got a small number of very close friends. I love spending time with them. I shoot as a sport. And so I go shooting on the weekends sometimes and enjoy that. I'm not a hunter, so I never shoot an animal, but I shoot a target.
Okay.
And enjoy that very much. Yeah, I suppose that's it.
So we always ask this question as a closing question on the show. And you mentioned the 4-year-old. So when the boy grows up and comes to you and says, "Dad, I'm thinking of a career in medicine," what advice do you have for me? What would you tell?
Well, it's easy for me to answer because I've had that conversation with my 19-year-old daughter.
What did you tell her?
I said to her, it's the most fabulous career and I strongly encourage it, but you need to be deeply passionate. And are you quite sure that's what you want to do? It's a long road. You need to live, eat, breathe, and sleep that. Your friends are going to be working and earning money. You're still going to be a student. If you're going to specialize, you're in for a very long haul, 12 to 15 years. You're going to be well into your 30s by the time you enter real working life and start earning a decent living. And, you know, are you that committed? And in her case, her decision was, I'm not passionate enough. Although we're now 6 months into first year and she's doing business science and she's reconsidering and has applied for medicine now.
Good.
Oh, wow. Is she the daughter that started a hashtag compassion during
No, that
COVID?
was my older daughter.
Okay.
So that's Tegan, my older daughter. She's turning 22 imminently. And she is she's in doing actuarial science at Stellenbosch
Okay.
and going to do an honors next year.
I guess the big question is, how do you know whether you're passionate about something? That's the thing. How do you know?
Yeah, I think that's a very smart question. And, you know, I think when you are 18, finished school, and you have to choose a profession, I just don't think you have the maturity or life experience to understand what you're choosing. It's a little bit like choosing a life partner. I also think that at those young ages, you're just too young to choose a life partner. One must wait until you're older. And the same applies for a career. Although our world is fast-paced, and certainly the young people feel under pressure. I did when I was young, feel under pressure to get going on with life. You don't want to lose time. People are overtaking you. And there is that feeling around. So it does push you in a direction. But look at me. I mean, I made a big pivot in my career. I don't do any healthcare day to day. Sadly, I miss it. But I love the stuff that I do now. And I made a real pivot. So it doesn't mean you're committed for life.
Yeah. I was a dentist who became a lawyer. And now I'm interviewing the ex-CEO and the CEO of DNI and all these things. So, you know, you never know. You can be 50 and then change. Right?
Exactly. How old are you?
I'm 37.
Wow, you could be my son.
So, yeah, any closing comments from you, Ryan? I mean,
just to say thanks.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a great conversation and relaxed, and well done on what you're doing. And you've converted me into a listener.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to add you on LinkedIn so I can unsubscribe from my
Please
premium.
do. Let me save you the 267 Rand or whatever you said it was.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Thanks.
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 That's fine.
Yeah.
Sweet.